Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining Talk Tuesday. We'll let everyone get situated here as they populate our space. And Jaren, if you don't mind going to the next slide, we have a little introduction prompt for you all. If you don't mind saying hello in the chat, sharing your role, and maybe a little something that you might be hoping to learn today about meeting facilitation. Good morning, Jay Brown. It's nice to see you.
Good morning. It's great to be here. How are you, Caroline?
I'm well. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
All right. So while folks are joining, and go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, share who you are, where you're from, what you might be looking forward to learning about today. We are going to go ahead and get started. It is 10 o'clock. And we are so excited to have our presenters with us today. Erin Dunn is joining us from EastCon, and Jackie Love is joining us from Griswold Elementary School. And they have lots of great information on tap for you this morning. Good morning, Sharon. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Elaine. We'll keep those introductions rolling. And we also want to give a shout out and a thank you, as always, to our CSDE partners. Kari Sullivan Custer can't be with us this morning, but she sends her best to everybody. Jay Brown is here from the Bureau of Special Education, who kindly funds this project. So we are so happy to have you here this morning, Jay. And thank you to my EdAdvance team, Jaren and Diane and Devana, who work hard on the back end to make everything smooth for you. And thank you, of course, to our participants for showing up, because this would not be very exciting without you. My name is Caroline Calhoun. I am a professional learning and attendance specialist here at EdAdvance, the RESC in the northwest corner of the state. And I am the producer of Talk Tuesday, and I also coordinate the Learner Engagement Attendance Program for CSDE, which is our flagship home visiting program. So I've worked with many of you, also lots of new faces in the space. So happy to have everybody here with us this morning. Let's go to the next slide, please. We wanted to share some highlights and happenings with you this morning. We mentioned this last time we were together as well, but this is coming up this week, so we wanted to highlight it for you again. In the Superintendent's Digest, they have been advertising this new Student Support Series webinar, which CSDE has collaborated with DCF to launch this newly this year. This student support series is really focused on professional learning around all things youth, mental, and behavioral health. So as we know, that is a really critical topic for us in the education space. So the first session is coming up this week on the 25th from 9 to 10:30. And Kari Sullivan Custer and two of our partners at Attendance Works, senior fellows, are going to be talking about attendance and how we can improve attendance through connection and care. This series is open to everybody, but we did want to note that each of these 90-minute sessions that are part of the series are going to be providing 1.5 continuing education credits for anyone who's part of the Connecticut chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. So these are valid CECs for social workers, licensed professional counselors, licensed psychologists, and marriage and family therapists. So it is a great opportunity to earn some of those credits as needed. But again, anybody is welcome who is interested in this topic. Next slide, please. Once again, we wanted to note for you also this week, Attendance Works, our partners in California, really the guru nonprofit organization in the country around everything to do with attendance. They have their fourth and final attendance campaign webinar is on the 24th. So information is there for you to register. Should be lots of great information for you if you attend that. Next slide, please. And the other information from Attendance Works we wanted to highlight for you this week is that they have offered for years data collection tools for school level and district level attendance teams, but they have just done some improvements to those tools. So we wanted to highlight that for you. These are free tools that really help teams visualize their chronic absence data. So they call them the DATS and SATs, which is for district or school attendance tracking tools. And really what these are self-calculating Excel spreadsheets, but they have accompanying guidance so that you can sort of walk through how to use them with your teams. And anybody who wants to access those, there's a registration link, and Attendance Works has also provided an informative blog post about these tools. So we encourage you to check those out. The fact that they're free is huge. I know I was talking to some colleagues in some of our elite districts, and they are planning to use these because it's a really nice way to visualize and organize this data, which is a big part of our attendance work. So thank you, Jaren. Let's go to the next slide. The other opportunity this week we wanted to highlight, and Erin, our presenter today, is part of this work as well. We have a newly developed RESC Alliance MTSS Task Force. It sounds very official and fancy. Really, it's just gathering expertise across the RESCs to support districts in collaboration with CSDE to make sure that everybody is getting the support they need across the state. So we are offering a series of professional learning opportunities this year to support districts and schools as they develop and refine everything to do with MTSS, which, as we know, is really a huge all-encompassing umbrella. And so we have a virtual informational session coming up on Thursday this week. It's short, it's only about 45 minutes, and it's an opportunity for folks to come on, engage in a bit of a self-assessment of your current practices, and then learn about these upcoming sessions that are going to highlight all sorts of evidence-aligned strategies to advance your MTSS implementation. So we have a registration link for you there as well. If you can't make the session, no worries. You can reach out to your local RESC for more information. Erin and I are both point people for our RESCs, and we're happy to provide more information about that. One of the sessions, I will say, is going to be all about attendance and engagement, which we are partnering on with another colleague, Luke Forshaw, out of CES. So we hope you join that session and can potentially join some of those that series throughout this school year. So MTSS implementation. Thank you, Jaren. Let's go to the next slide. And the last thing I've curated for you all this morning is many of you likely subscribe to the Marshall Memo, which is a curated collection of articles all to do with K-12 education throughout the year. Kim Marshall does a wonderful job of this. He is an educator. He's also comes into districts and does PD and all sorts of strategic planning. But it's a really nice way to get sort of snapshots of what's happening and what's current across the country when it comes to all publications around K-12 education. And the one that really caught my eye from a recent issue on September 8th was what he called this power of a brief social belonging intervention. So this is an article that was published in Educational Leadership a couple of weeks ago, and it is really helpful for us all of us who are working in the attendance space, because this was research conducted about an intervention that is very successful for our high school students. And as we all know, the data around chronic absenteeism at the high school level tends to be some of the most challenging for all of us. So any interventions that are research-based that we can implement at low or no cost, especially, are incredibly helpful. So this research showed, this was out of the University of Virginia, and these researchers presented to a group of ninth graders at a summer orientation this video about how juniors and seniors were explaining how originally, before they started high school, they were really anxious about not fitting in, not belonging, but how that anxiety sort of dissipated and lessened over time. And so the researchers were emphasizing for these students that those anxieties are really widely shared, but they're also temporary. And I thought back to my own high school experience and thinking about being the oldest child in my family. I didn't have an older sibling to rely on who had already paved the way, and how this is such a common experience for our young students starting high school. So the researchers had these students write a letter to future ninth graders, kind of reassuring them that, hey, this will go away, it will get better, you'll find your place, you'll find your people. And the research proved that this intervention boosted students' attendance, and it boosted their academic performance, their behavior, and their sense of belonging at school, which I think is so powerful. And this was in comparison to a control group that the researchers were analyzing. And another note from the research was that the Black and Hispanic students that were part of the study had especially positive gains. So when we think about disproportionality when it comes to chronic absence and how something so small as this little letter to reassure students can have really quite a measured effect and positive impact on students' sense of belonging and showing up to school. So we wanted to highlight that for you all because I think it's something that can be implemented fairly easily and pretty seamlessly at the high school level. So perhaps folks will do that. And I see comments in the chat, Ruth, that you do that with elementary students. I love that. I know when I taught 5th and 6th grade, that transition to middle school was always really challenging. So anything we can do at those sort of pinch points can be really helpful. So thank you to Kim Marshall and the Marshall Memo for highlighting that for us this week. And let's go to our next slide. We want to remind you, as always, we have our learner engagement attendance program. All of our trainings come out of the Connecticut Home Visit Hub at the CREC Resource Group. This is managed by our colleague, Nushette Black-Burke, staffed by really wonderful CREC facilitators and coaches, and this is open to everyone. So even if you do not have LEAP grant funding, you are all welcome to attend these trainings. It gets folks into that mindset of a partnership between families and school personnel who are conducting home visits, really aligned with our cornerstones of flexibility and cultural responsiveness. So check that out if you haven't already done so. And the next training is coming up on October 8th, and we have shared that registration link for you there. One note logistically for participants, if you haven't joined us yet this year, you will see that Diane, my colleague, has added the link to these slides are already available for everybody, and we will share them out later as well. And Kari does a great job posting everything to the CSDE website. So lots of opportunities to find this in real time and then later as needed for folks who can't be on. Let's go to my last slide about resources. And Kari and I just always want to make sure you have everything at your fingertips in terms of resources from the state that can help you with all of the attendance work you're doing. So everything from policies and procedures, data, bright spots, all of that is linked there for you. So those are all the updates I have for everybody. I'd love to take a minute or two right now to introduce both Erin and Jackie so you know a little bit about them before you hear their expertise all about meeting facilitation and holding effective, powerful meetings. So let's go to our next slide and I will tell you a little bit about Erin. So Dr. Erin Dunn is a senior educational and behavioral consultant at EastCon, which is our RESC in Eastern Connecticut. And during her career, Dr. Dunn has focused primarily on academic and behavioral assessment, evidence-based intervention, alternative ed, and MTSS. So in addition to providing consultation to schools across Connecticut, she has published several articles and book chapters. She served as the director of behavioral psychology at a school for students with brain injury and neurobehavioral disorders. She's taught graduate level courses in her area of expertise, and her current work really focuses on increasing district level expertise and efficiency for students' academic, behavioral, and social emotional well-being by creating and supporting data-based teams. So this work relies on the MTSS framework, and so she's bringing all of that expertise to the space this morning as she shares information with us. And let's go to the next slide so we can introduce Jackie. So Jackie is an assistant principal at Griswold Public Schools at their elementary school. And she has dedicated 18 years to education, beginning her career as a 5th grade teacher in Norwich Public Schools. And Jackie later served as the math and literacy specialist at Stanton Elementary School, where she partnered with CSDE on systems level work. And for the past 9 years, Jackie's been at Griswold Elementary, where she continues to apply her expertise and her passion for student growth and instructional improvement. And outside of school, you can find her with her son, William, who's 16, and their golden lab, Louie. And most often, you can find her at the baseball field, cheering William on from the sidelines. And I know many of us on this call who are parents and on those sidelines cheering for our kiddos can relate. So welcome, Erin, and welcome, Jackie. We are delighted to have you here with us today. And I think at this point, Jaren is going to pass the sharing over to Erin, and we will get rolling with their content.
Thank you so much for having us here. We're really excited to be able to bring this to the teams who are joining us today. And so when we think about this work that we're doing, attendance work, and other MTSS work, really, we have such a limited amount of time, limited resources. So it's really important for us to be as efficient as we possibly can. And so that's what Caroline asked us to talk about today as we were problem solving what would be most helpful to districts. And Jackie is joining me today to just really talk about the application of this in one building as we've navigated through this. And the things that were lessons learned, the things that were highlights or successes, as well as some of the work that we continue to have to think through, because this work, like all MTSS work, is an effort of continuous improvement that we approach with a growth mindset and continue to kind of walk through that process together. So as Caroline mentioned, I am from EastCon, which is this upper Northeast region of the RESC Alliance, or the RESC, the different RESC options. And I'm very excited that we're continuing to do more and more work as a RESC Alliance so that we can partner together. As a RESC Alliance, I'm also the representative who is connected to the CT-SEDS MTSS module that the state supports and funds. And so you may have interacted with me in that format as well. And Jackie and I are just excited to be here together. At EastCon, I am part of the Access team, which is the Advancing Coaching and Consultation to Empower Student Success team. And as that, what we do is really work together in a multidisciplinary team to support student needs and districts. So what we really came here to talk about is this idea of meetings and meeting foundations, and how we all are really working together in these meetings across different content areas. And oftentimes we can kind of feel like that could have been an email. I'm not sure I needed to actually be present for that meeting. And so really a lot of our work is to think about these meeting foundations, and we really do not take the opportunity to sit down with a team lightly. When we're pulling people together, oftentimes we're pulling people from such important other work. And so we have to really think about how are we navigating these opportunities to get together with precision and with very data-based, evidence-based meeting foundations. And so when you think about a meeting, and I'd love if we could just sound off in the chat, when you think about the meetings that you've been involved in, what are the experiences that you have? What are the features of the meetings that make them effective? So in your experience, when you've been in a meeting that has run really well, what did that look like for you? So we'll just give a minute for people to sound off in the chat. Keep it coming. So we see that there is a lot of organization, that we see a lot of participation from different people, clear goals, having updated information and data to share. This goes back to what Caroline was talking about with having access to EdSite information or information from your attendance work opportunities or other kinds of dashboards. Having agenda items with a time structure, collaboration, brainstorming, respecting each other's time. Yes, goals, communication, a well-prepared facilitator. Yes, all of these things, you are naming all of the things that we know from the literature is also really critical features to teams that function well. Norms, having the right people at the table. Yes, all of these things. Thank you for sharing what your experience is, because it really lines up with where we want to go with this. You know, oftentimes when we are looking at sort of what's confronting us, right? Oftentimes we're having a meeting where we're trying to do some problem solving. And we come to the table, we have a lot to say, we have a very limited amount of time to say it. And sometimes what happens is we sort of end up in some different side conversations. We get distracted by things. In some of our terminology, we would say, you know, we have to be really mindful not to go from problem identification and get into sort of problem admiration, where we're all really having just the only moment we have probably had to sit down and reflect on what is going on. But that can kind of create some situations where, yeah, that's what I see too. And yes, yes. And we end up spending a lot of time just confirming and admiring the issue. And what we really want to do is to think about, how do we drive our work to go from a clear identification of the problem to the generation of a solution? And how do we structure that so that we are more likely to land in that space? And a key to collective problem solving is having strong meeting foundations and systems. And so we want to talk about what the critical components are of those systems. What's the magic? You know, the magicians have a code where they can't give up their secrets, but the good thing is we don't have that code, and there is no magic, but there are strategies that we can align our work with that will push us in the right direction. So let's talk a little bit about that. So there has been a lot of research that has looked at what makes teams effective. Like, what is it that we need to think about when we are bringing a team together? And so Google has done some work around this. Some universities have done research on this. Google's study was called Project Aristotle, and they looked at their internal meetings and their internal teams, and they analyzed what it was about those teams that made them effective. So they were looking at, you know, if we create a team that's very similar in their makeup, very homogeneous, is that the most effective team? If we were to have individuals who are very heterogeneous, very different, come from a lot of different areas, is that the best type of team? They also looked at things like personality and whether or not it mattered if you had introverts or extroverts or a mix. And then more studies looked at things like, is it the team with the highest average IQ, or the team with the most degrees or diplomas or advanced education? And the interesting thing that they found was that more than who was on the team was how they did the work, the way that they came together, and their shared understanding of their purpose, their shared understanding of their norms. So what they found was that teams needed to, number one, believe that their work was important. They had to actually care about the topic and be committed to doing that work. They had to connect with that personally, like it needed to be important to them. we needed to have clear goals and defined roles. So we wanted to make sure that everyone was an active participant and that everyone was clear about what the outcome was that they were looking for and what their place was in that. They also needed to have shared accountability. So they needed to be able to rely on each other, to know that if someone said they were going to do something, that they were going to do it. And then finally, and actually most importantly, was the establishment of psychological safety. So let's talk a little bit about what psychological safety is. And I bring up Brené Brown because she's one of my favorite influencing social work researchers. She falls in so many different fantastic categories, but she talks a lot about vulnerability and the ability to be in agencies, companies, personal environments where you can be vulnerable. And that's really connected to that psychological safety. Psychological safety is the idea that you would come to a meeting and that you would be able to share information, concerns, ideas, and be comfortable that the people at the table are going to receive them generously, that they are going to feel that they're going to hear things in the most positive way possible, to assume positive intentions, and that if you were to throw out a crazy idea, that people would really be looking for the positive nugget of that idea, because you really have to be able to be complex and creative problem solvers when you're trying to overcome some of the things that are thrown at us in education, right? And so you have to be able to feel like you can be your authentic self and that your teammates will receive that positively. And that's what psychological safety really comes down to. So to establish that, one of the most important things that we talk through in our meetings at the beginning of each year is, what are our meaning norms? What do we believe as a team is the way we want to do business? And so oftentimes we will have components in there that are directly getting at establishing psychological safety. There's a lot of literature about how to establish psychological safety as a leader. And I would encourage you, if this is something that you're interested in, to follow up about that. At the very end of this, we will put up a QR code that you can click on and complete a survey if you want additional information and resources related to what we've shared. But these are some examples of our teams and their norms and how we go about establishing those norms. So oftentimes we include some things that really drive at that psychological safety: a safe space to openly address conflicts and resolve them. I think that's a part of it. It also needs to be a brave space, right? Being present, being clear on next steps, focus on collaboration, give grace, right? So these are all things where we're saying we have to be able to rely on each other and we're going to assume positive intentions. Similarly, here's another example. One of the things that we know is a measure of whether or not psychological safety has been established is the degree to which everyone contributes something in a meeting. So if everyone is getting their voice heard, that is one indicator that you have some level of psychological safety. So we do look at, how do we give everyone a voice, and how do we actively ask for participation, especially from people who might be a little more hesitant to share things verbally? What are the other ways that they can contribute, or how do we create a space where they do feel brave enough to speak up? So Jackie, can you talk a little bit about this idea of establishing norms and psychological safety and what you've seen in your experience?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so psychological safety, I think we've all been in meetings before where we've sort of been maybe afraid to say something, just maybe wondering about what other people are thinking. And as we set up our MTSS teams the last year or so, we really put an emphasis on making sure that our team members just feel comfortable with sharing the ideas that they have, solutions that they have, even the problems that they have. And it's been really important for all of us to practice how to validate some of those concerns that are being brought to the table or problems, because they are essentially looking for that collaborative solution. So we've really put that emphasis on the psychological safety and norms, just so that people, really feel like they have a voice, they can contribute to the meeting, and they know that we are solution focused. And that's been the work that, Erin had with our partnership has started with our team. And now it's just become part of our regular meetings, and everybody is able to kind of say the things that they need to, but also, we keep going with the agenda to make sure that we are solution focused.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So let's talk a little bit more about what other components of are critical features to meetings that work. So there's the psychological safety and the establishment of norms. And then there's what we would consider to be kind of true meeting foundations, action planning. So making sure that we have very clear who is going to do what by when we leave a meeting. And then another component is precise problem solving. That precise problem solving is something that we're going to table for today. But as Caroline mentioned, that larger MTSS, RESC Alliance opportunities, this will be a focus topic for one of those sessions, but we're really going to focus on the meeting foundations and the action planning for today. So what is the makeup of what good meeting foundations entails? So a clear purpose, a predictable structure, meeting roles and responsibilities, and having agenda and minutes. And those are really the 4 critical components of strong meeting foundations. And while that can feel like a very dry kind of like, oh, yep, topic, I think that it is important for us to return to that regularly and think about where might we be doing a phenomenal job on these things, and where do we maybe have some room for growth or development on these 4 components. So we're going to talk a little bit about them one at a time. Clear purpose. What is the purpose of our team, and what's the impact we want to have on students, families, and schools? So what is our overarching goal, and how are we going to measure whether or not we are successful? And that can look very different even within the realm of attendance. In some cases, our overarching goal might be to increase the percent of students who are present on any given day across the building. In other cases, we might have our focus be that we want to decrease chronic absenteeism for certain populations, grade levels, or the school. So knowing what it is that is really behind the why of what we're doing so that we can stay focused on that, and establishing the impact that we want to have. What is going to be different from what it was previously because we are having these meetings and discussions, and being very intentional about that. The second piece is that predictable structure. So when we are meeting, we want to think about what is it that happens during every meeting. So for example, in our work, during every meeting, we start with celebrations. What went well this week? What did you notice? Everyone knows that we're going to start our meeting with celebrations. The second thing we're going to do is review our action plan. Did we finish the action items we said we were going to do from our last meeting? And then the third thing we're going to do is we are going to look to see if we have any new students who we need to consider or incorporate into the process through parent or teacher request. So we're always going to follow those first three things every time we meet. Everybody knows that that's what they need to be prepared for, which means they need to complete their action items because we are going to circle back to it at the beginning of every meeting. Then we're going to do a tier 1 data review. We're going to look at the health of our tier 1 from an attendance perspective. So we're going to ask, on average, are 95% of our students present on any given school day across subpopulations and grades, as well as the whole school? And we're going to ask, do we have less than 10% of students on track for chronic absenteeism? If those things are not true, we know we have to think about our tier 1 work. If those things are well established and we're in good shape with that, then we can do a little bit more digging on the tier 2. Of course, we're always going to be thinking about that tier 2 and 3 and student problem solving, even if we're not where we need to be from a tier 1 perspective. But the amount of resources and focus that we are going to have is going to be different depending on our numbers. And so we are going to do that process whenever we're together. And then the last thing we do is review and set the agenda for the next meeting, which means review our action items that we've established and complete our meeting reflection questions. Depending on the meeting, we might have different meeting reflection questions. So examples of meeting reflection questions might be something as similar as did everyone speak in the meeting? So that we can say that, we're working towards that psychological safety. I have teams where the meeting reflection question is, did we build the capacity of staff today? Did we build the capacity of students today? I have teams where they're asking themselves, did we implement an evidence-based intervention today? So it really depends on what your goal and focus are related to that purpose, but reflecting in a meta way about the success of your meeting is a part of this work. So let's do another sound off in the chat. What structures do you consistently include in your meetings? So what are some of the key features that you would say, whether you have a written predictable structure or you're just kind of reflecting on your predictable structures that you have or your consistent structures or agenda items? What are some of the things that you always want to make sure that you cover in your meetings? Great. Thank you, Dave. We're looking to hear from many voices, it's including some wait time, some sort of reflection. Great. Always looking at the data. Data-driven decision-making is part of a value that I think that we can't emphasize enough, right? Role assignments. Yes, always making sure that we review those roles. We're going to talk about roles in a minute, and I'm excited to hear what you all incorporate with that. Celebrations. Yes. How do we celebrate what we're observing in terms of the gains that we're seeing, the growth? Sometimes we dig deep for those celebrations, and sometimes they're super obvious, but we are so inclined to problem solving that we sometimes forget to look to see, like, what are we doing really great? I know each of us have probably been in that meeting where the student was not coming more than 30% of the school days, and now they're coming 80% of the school days, and it doesn't feel like enough, but celebrating that growth. Or you get the student present and everyone realizes, well, but they're not doing any work. And you're like, yes, but we have to celebrate that they're here now. And that is the first step in getting other things done. Flagging students. And I love that you're reflecting and referring to students as scholars. Yes, going through and looking at specific tasks that need to be done. I love this. So thank you for sharing some of those structures that you're consistently looking at. The other thing that I want to talk about within structures and predictability is scheduling. And scheduling with meetings, making sure that the right people are in the room to have the conversations is something that I feel like we often think of as a side task within our work. And I think about a colleague that really influenced me. I was early on in this work and I went to a session and he said, you know, I used to wake up and thank you, Ruth. I used to wake up in the middle of the night and think, if only we had this, or if only we could get these people at the table, or if only we had a schedule, particularly at middle school and high school levels, if only we had a schedule that could do this, then I could do the work. And he said, and then one day I woke up and I was like, oh, wait, that is the work. And that to me was like a light bulb moment of like, there is nothing more important than really thinking strategically about logistics and scheduling and how to bring those people together at the table. And it takes iterations. You know, we've been working with different teams in different buildings. And the first year, we think we come up with this great solution. And then 3/4 or a half or somewhere in the school year, we're like, okay, that did not exactly work. And next year we're going to try it this way. And it's kind of like other things where you kind of do it once, you learn what you did wrong, you improve it in year 2, and year 3, you might nail it and kind of feel like, okay, now we're making this work. And Jackie, I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about the logistics, the scheduling, the predictable structures, those kinds of things, and how they might have impacted your work at the elementary level.
Yeah, so time is what everybody needs, right? And planning time is so crucial. So one of the things that we did as a building was try to stay away from teacher planning time because we know how important that is during the day and how busy things get. So we created a structure where in the morning there's a block of time each day, Monday through Friday, from 8-ish to about 8:40, where we structured in some focused meetings. So, for example, on Tuesdays, we would have our curriculum meetings with support from our TLI department. They would come and be assigned to a grade level and help support curriculum development and planning. And then on Wednesdays, we do our MTSS teams, and people come to the table and we do that collaborative work with a very focused agenda. And on Thursdays, teachers will meet as grade levels and do housekeeping items and then also kid talks. So those kid talks are where they bring students up that, you know, whether they need enrichment or intervention supports, you know, we just really kind of look at the student as a whole. And that's a time where they can try to problem solve a little bit together. We did this last year and the feedback we got was pretty good for having focused meetings. But what we did find was that 3 meetings during the week was maybe 3 too many. So we decided to kind of compromise this year, and we've only done, now it's 2 meetings. They do, you know, their work with their grade level teams one day, and then they do their curriculum meetings another day. So we've kind of taken the best of both worlds, but you know, staying away from the teacher planning time and creating a structure where the meetings are very focused has been a huge help for our building.
Yeah, and it's been a learning curve in terms of like what works best for people. And I love also just to kind of note that that in the structure, I think if I'm not mistaken, Jackie, you have partnered for those Thursday meetings to have a member of either the mental health supports or a curriculum support person, depending on the nature of the needs at that grade level, the primary nature of the needs, so that they push into those Thursday conversations to allow there to be some more specialist level problem solving as well, right?
Right. we established like a communication chain at our MTSS meeting. We have representation from all of the grade levels, from special ed to support team to admin, and we assign each person a grade level so that the communication can flow through between the MTSS team and the grade level team, and that there's somebody there to provide support, whether it be academic, SEB, attendance, all of those things. So that's been really critical, especially for our building. We have about 700 students and we have about 6 teachers per grade level, pre-K through 4. So communicating is not easy. It's not the easiest of feats. So creating that communication chain and having somebody responsible for just a small group of people has helped us to be able to communicate across the building with a very consistent message.
Great. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about roles and responsibilities. And, you know, when Jackie is talking about their work within the MTSS realm, attendance is one of their main focuses within that MTSS process. So while some buildings might have attendance as its own, they kind of have a hybrid. So they bring it into the MTSS structure, but then they have like an attendance subcommittee that is doing pre-work and post-work related to the conversations in the larger group. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So when we have these meeting foundations, there are some core roles that are generally reflected in the literature as critical roles within a meeting foundation and structure. So for example, a facilitator, and somebody mentioned that in the chat, like having a facilitator that can really navigate the process. This does not have to be an administrator. It needs to be somebody who is comfortable making sure that they stay aligned with the agenda and can encourage that psychological safety of making sure that people's voices are heard. Then we also have a note taker and action planner. Sometimes this is the same person. Sometimes 2 people take these roles, one as the note taker and one as the action planner, and making sure that we have a clear sense of who is going to do what by when is really important in these meetings. We have data analyst and resource, and the person who identifies the data and reviews the data and then connects that to resources. So oftentimes this can be a content specific role. So if you are the person who is the family liaison or a social worker or a school psychologist, oftentimes you may be the person who looks at the attendance data to prepare for those conversations in the meetings. A timekeeper. This is probably the most underutilized important role, but you know, sometimes that is a tough one, and but making sure that we're keeping on track, and that can be very closely connected to the people who might be assigned to deal with logistics and scheduling. Sometimes that's an administrator because they're the people who are able to protect time in a particular way. It's also connected to the role that we call the parking lot attendant. The parking lot attendant is the person who listens for really important conversations that might not be necessary or appropriate to have in that moment. So it's something that we want to come back to. It's something that needs to be on a future agenda or taken and pushed to a different meeting, but it might be something that we can't solve in that moment or isn't relevant to the current agenda, but needs to be put on the parking lot for a future conversation. And then of course, an administrator. And so you wouldn't necessarily have one person per role. Sometimes people are in 2 different roles, right? So I might be the person who is an administrator and I'm also the timekeeper, or I could be someone who is the parking lot person and the timekeeper. So you may not need one person for each role, but identifying who's going to do what is really important. Additional roles might be things like case liaisons. So for tier 2 or tier 3 intervention, who is going to be the person who is going to be the liaison among all of the different services. So who this person might be the person who communicates to the family, communicates to the student, and coordinates supports for that individual student. Does not need to be a social worker or a school psychologist. It could be the person who has the best relationship with the student. It really depends. Everybody should be an active team member. Oftentimes we talk about in our norms the importance of professional the sort of not multitasking, being able to really be present in the moment. Sometimes conversations might take a turn and you think, oh, for a second, this isn't really relevant to me, and I'm going to just answer this email. But we don't know when it's going to be relevant to us. And everyone's voice is super important, even if the voice is, wait a minute, have we thought about this? Or how are we going to translate? Or I'm not understanding, maybe it's because that's not my field of expertise. But if I'm not understanding, I don't know that the family is going to understand. So really important to stay active. And then our specialist roles. So these could be mental health specialists, academic specialists, a teacher representative, a special education representative, family liaison. So everyone is bringing their hat into the conversation. And then in some cases, teams like to pair their tricky discussions with positive other options. So some teams have said, we're going to have a weekly caterer and each person takes a role bringing snacks. So it can kind of be as flexible of these additional roles as you want, but those core roles really need to be a part of the conversation. And then we have to think about what are our roles within the meeting, but also the before the meeting. What are we doing to prepare? An hour a week is a lot for us to carve out, especially for each of the different meetings. But if we don't do the pre-work, we're not going to make significant headway on a topic. Then there's what we actually are doing during the meeting, and then the after meeting or the post meeting. So making sure that we're following up with our action items, making sure that we are circling back on the things that are within our role and closing those things out. So this is just a quick poll to see what's your favorite role to have on the team. So let's see if I can get this to play. I'm not sure if I can because of that I'm within a different, it might not go for me in using this sort of platform. It worked when I practiced it, but I don't know if it's because we kind of merged our, so let's just go from here. So sound off in the chat. What role do you prefer to have on your attendance team? Marjorie's the note taker. That's my favorite role as well, because that's how I stay engaged. Timekeeper, facilitator, data analyst. Lots of facilitators, which makes sense. That's probably how you were nominated to attend the Talk Tuesdays too. Awesome. So I'm going to have Jackie share at the end because I want to make sure to preview just some options for agendas and minutes. And then we're going to talk about the roles, responsibilities, and agendas, just looking at our time. So we have a couple of formats that we use for our action planning and note taking. Here's one example that's very kind of low key. And we always make sure we take attendance at every meeting. So we start with our homepage and we have our attendance and the dates of our meetings, as well as any quick links. And we make sure that we identify our goals right there. We also have a section on action items. So the date, the goal, action plan, who will do what by when. what you're seeing over here, these document tabs, is a newer feature in Google Docs. And so I would super encourage you to use these tabs to help make navigation a lot easier so that you're not having to scroll as much and you can be able to really quickly get where you want to be. Also now within Google Docs is that when you have these little drop downs, you can now actually sort by those drop downs in a table. I didn't tag this as the header, so it sorted everything for me. But if I tagged that as the header, it wouldn't have done that. But so that you can see what action items have been done, what haven't, and then go back and resort by date. So just using those features is really helpful. And then having our notes and the agendas in an accessible place. So that's one example of a simple action plan. This action plan here is a little more complex. Again, it has a lot of the same features in terms of being able to navigate through using our tabs. But what you'll see in this is that we have our norms at the top and our goals. We have lots of links available. Down here, when you have our dates predetermined, you can link to that date where you have the agenda here. And what you'll see is that predictable structure. So every time we meet, we have that predictable structure. Doesn't mean that we don't have opportunities or occasions where we come in and modify this to meet our needs. But in general, we follow a predictable schedule and structure. And then we also have that action plan. And we like to use the features within the action plan. Like, for example, if I am the person responsible for doing this, then I come in and I can say @edone, and I can assign that to myself. And then I receive an email letting me know that I have an action item that was identified that I need to complete. And when I'm done with that action item, I can come in and I can click the link, say that I completed it, and I'm all set. So that work can be done before the meeting so that when you go to review the action items, you're able to sort and just look at the things that were partially completed or weren't able to be completed so you can problem solve barriers. So being able to use some of these features can be very, very helpful. So Jackie, can you talk a little bit about roles and responsibilities as well as your experience with having the structured agendas and action plans?
Yeah, so it is funny because I think the timekeeper is the most underrated role in the meeting, but the timekeeper, for me as a facilitator is like my sidekick. So when, conversations start to go a little bit long, the timekeeper can kind of come in and just say, hey, we've got to get to the next agenda item, and keeps everybody on track. Also, just to kind of blend the action items, that agenda and the note taking has been really a difference maker for us, because having the action items assigned to different people on the team really has given ownership to each individual and what they're able to, go away and complete and come back. It gives everybody, again, that voice and that chance to contribute to the meeting. And it really just makes a huge difference knowing when you walk away from a meeting who's doing what, because oftentimes people have great ideas and then we are like, all right, we walk away thinking, who's going to do that? Who's actually going to create that plan or communicate with that person? So just making a simple note of that, and when it's completed or if it's still being worked on, just keeps our meetings focused, and it ensures everybody is clear on what those action items are. And at the end of the year, it's kind of like your journal. You go back and you see, I think for our school at the end of the year, our action item list was, I don't know, probably pages and pages. But it was really nice to go back and see the work that we did, where we started and where we ended. And it gave everybody a sense of just pride and ownership, and looking at how we're best supporting students, but together as a team.
Thank you, Jackie. That was great. I saw a couple questions of people asking for resources. And so if you are interested in one of the resources we shared or more information, I know the PowerPoint is loaded, but I think that you might need to request for access to certain templates. And so this would be the way that you would access those templates, would be to use this QR code or the Google form here to just indicate what it is that you would be interested in having access to, and we can get those resources shared to you. Or if you have additional questions, you can definitely do that, or reach out to our department director, who is Dr. Stein, who wasn't able to be here today, but is happy to field questions or share resources. So thank you so much for having us. Thank you, Jackie, for partnering with me, not just today, but over the years, and our continued work towards improving systems and reflecting on how we do this in an efficient way, even when some of our conversations have to be a little bit about these systems and meeting foundations, which we would love all of our conversations to be about students, but this is how we get the work done, right? Is by leaning into our systems and making sure that everyone is on the same page. Yes, thank you, Ruth. The foundations make the work. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Caroline, for having us. And I know you have an additional slide here, so I'll pop to it. But if you have, I know you have access to these slides. I think they have been very diligently shared throughout today, but this would be the QR code that you would use for accessing or requesting resources.
Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you so much, Jackie. I think all of this information is really helpful as we all navigate making our meetings as efficient and streamlined and helpful and student-focused and problem-solving oriented as we can. That phrase, admiring the problem. We've all been at those meetings, and we've all sat through meetings where it could have been an email. So these are really helpful, just very concrete takeaways and reminders for our work. We hope that you all can join us next Tuesday. We have a Super Talk Tuesday on tap on October 7th for a discussion around the information from our Department of Public Health, from SD's Office of Wellness and Supports. We have a colleague joining us from Learn, Kristen Kondash, who's the nursing supervisor there, so that we can all think about how to keep our buildings, our students and families healthy and coming to school and showing up to learn. So we hope to see you on the 7th. And thank you again to Erin and Jackie. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Thanks for joining us today. Bye-bye.